so much, everyone, for joining us for today's masterclass. So this is our seventh QA masterclass we are doing in line, and so basically we are doing this for giving testing strategies and current trends in the QA, and to share our career growth to empower the testers all around the globe. So today, we're gonna deal with a very interesting topic. So with Giridhar Rajkumar, so it is testing in DevOps. You all know, DevOps is the one of the hottest trends in the software industry, and it is the fast-growing stream. So no like Today he'll be with us and he will share his insight. And before proceeding forward to the session, and it's my duty to talk about little more about the speaker here. And first of all, thank you so much, Giridhar, for accepting our invite to feature in our QA masterclass. So Giridhar Rajkumar is an author, speaker, and successful instructor in test automation and DevOps concepts. And he comes with 11 years of experience in the IT industry, and he has worked with multiple customers in the UK, EU, India, and Latin America for successful transformation in test automation and DevOps. And he's passionate about exploring new technologies and is an expert in Agile and DevOps. And he is also a successful trainer, and no oh god, like he have trained over like 5,000 plus professionals in test automation to get well versed with the concepts and help them implement in real time. And he is an official Cypress ambassador and the co-founder of Cypress UK community meetup. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Giridhar Rajkumar to share his insight. Over to you, Giridhar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shrija. That was just a good introduction to me.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. Please do let me know once you're able to see it. Cool. All right. Okay. Thanks once again, Shrija and DC Cap for having this particular session. So I'm very excited to be part of today's session, and the topic which I'm going to take is testing in DevOps, which I'm a very big fan of, and I have been practicing testing in DevOps for almost like 3 years now, and I've been working with multiple customers across UK and Europe, implementing the testing concepts in DevOps-based projects actually. So I'm a test automation consultant. So that is my day-to-day work. But off the work, I'm an author and I'm a podcaster as well. So I have written a couple of handbooks and cookbooks with related to test automation and the behavior-driven development concepts. And I have my own podcast, which is hosted in Anchor.fm, where I interview lots of successful test engineers and successful products that are there in the market to help them in marketing and to take different testing concepts to reach multiple people from the testing community. So in case if you'd like to connect with me, I'm available in LinkedIn. So you can just search for Giridhar Rajkumar and you can just connect me via LinkedIn as well. I have my own Git repo where I have just reposited most of my projects and all the tutorial related projects and article related projects over there. You can just, fork it and you can just make use of it. So having said that, so this is going to be our agenda for next 35 to 40 minutes. Testing in DevOps, if you take, it's a huge concept. You cannot cover it within 30 or 40 minutes. It's a huge one that I have learned for almost like 3 years now. And I keep on learning new stuffs that are coming as part of, DevOps and QA strategies. But I will try to limit myself. And I just wanted to, explain, or rather I wanted to share my personal experiences with quality assurance in DevOps along with, along with my practical implementation experience as well to you guys. First thing first, we will slightly get into know what exactly is DevOps. And then we will start looking what is QA in DevOps, in the sense like what is a role of a quality engineer in DevOps and how a QA should be done in DevOps. Using continuous testing. So we will get introduced to continuous testing and we will just try to see a basic concept of what this is all about and how it differs from the regular testing, what we do as part of our day-to-day basis. But we are not going to stop there. We are also going to talk about the different stages of continuous testing in pipeline. So this is something that I have drafted based on my personal experiences. But again, it differs from organization to organization. But this is something that is common across all organization, is what you can just take it from this particular session. And we are going to talk a little bit about best practices in case if you are a QA and if you want to adapt a DevOps culture in your project, how a QA should be prepared and what are the best practices that you need to follow in order to make sure that you're adhering to the DevOps culture of your project actually. So last but not the least, we will just have a quick live demo as well on Microsoft Azure, which I just prepared for this particular session. And we will just talk a little bit about the benefits and the challenges of continuous testing and how you have to prepare yourself for the challenges that you're going to take it forward. So before we continue, I just wanted to tell you that I assume that, like continuous testing is quite new to you folks, and, DevOps is quite new to you folks. Like Shrija mentioned earlier, right? It is a hot topic that is there in the industry as of today. And how, as a QA, we are supposed to get ready for this particular paradigm shifting culture when it comes to DevOps, right? All right, okay. So what is DevOps? So let's start from the scratch. Let's start from the beginning, right? So we just wanted to seed ourselves so that we can just, harvest the fruit later. So let's start from the scratch and understand what exactly DevOps is all about. So I love Wikipedia. So, like as per the Wikipedia's definition for DevOps, it says that it is a set of practices that we need to combine along with the software development and information technology operations. So what does it mean here? So basically speaking, we all know that once we develop an application and test an application, and once we deploy it, there is a separate team that takes care of all the operations and other things that are there, right? But DevOps is a concept that inherits and says that everyone should be working together in order to deliver a high software quality product actually. So that is a simple definition of DevOps. So basically a collaborative way in which everyone should be collaborated together, and we need to adhere a couple of topics like continuous delivery or continuous integration to make sure that we are delivering a high quality software to our customers actually, right? So having this in our mind, let's talk a little bit about common misunderstandings that are there as part of the industry actually. So DevOps, many people are thinking that DevOps is a tool, right? In an ideal scenario, it is not a tool or a product. Eventually, it means that it is a practice that we need to adhere with a couple of tools and frameworks to achieve a faster way of deploying or delivering our product actually, right? And many people are still thinking that it is a set of standards that we need to follow. So if I follow several standards like coding standards or automation standards, it means that I'm just doing a DevOps, right? So that is also a way of one of the misunderstanding that is there as part of today's world. So that is one thing that we need to keep in our mind, that it is not a set of standards. And the other one is like, it is something like a role. It is a role defined for a person. So let us say that in a team, if I keep a person called DevOps engineer, it means that I'm adapting the DevOps culture. No, it is not in that way actually. So that's where we just wanted to talk about more from the cultural difference actually. So DevOps is a cultural difference. It is something that you need to adhere to make sure that the product that you're developing is developed under a collaborative way of working actually, right? So that is okay. That is one part, that is from the process part. But how do we do the build and everything is something that we need to talk about from the DevOps perspective as well. So we use a couple of tools to do this particular, automated builds, automated test cases, automated test execution, etc., so that we will make sure that this particular DevOps culture is in place, right? So in case if you would like to know more about DevOps, or if you want to get introduced to DevOps, I have written a book and it is available in the amazon.co.uk website. Or in case if you want a free ebook, do buzz me in LinkedIn. I can send you a free ebook to this ebook to your chat as well, so that you will be able to download and make use of it. So this is all about the DevOps introduction. So let us keep in mind that it is just a collaborative way along with a set of tools Rather, I would say that it's an automated set of tools in order to deliver a product much faster, right? Let's keep that in mind. See, as a QA, that is more than enough for us. Let us not deep dive into DevOps, tools and how are we going to do DevOps and everything. Let us not think about it. As a QA, we will think that this is what DevOps is all about. But there are some things which we need to know as well from the QA perspective, right? So from the QA perspective, if your team is adhering to DevOps culture, you have to keep in mind that you should go automation every time. So there should be very less or no manual functional testing that should be involved in your project, which means you have to give very high importance to your automated tests rather than giving importance to your manual tests, right? So keep in mind, DevOps QA in DevOps has no manual testing. Just keep that in mind actually. So everything should be automated to make sure that the delivery is faster, right? So when you do manual testing, it means that you're doing something slow, right? Which is not something that DevOps suggests us. We wanted everything to be faster and try to adapt more automated, rather I would say that automation related tools, so that it will be able to do the entire testing phase in an automated fashion. So you will be able to deliver the product much faster, right? And this is, if you remember a couple of minutes back, I was telling that DevOps is a collaborative work, right, between everyone. So if you think that, like if you want to be more productive and if you want to be more faster in delivering a product, you can start adapting a BDD way of work culture actually. So being a BDD fanatic for almost like 8 years now, I've been practicing BDD for 8 years. And that is one of the key event which we have used across multiple organizations for the DevOps culture, which helped so many organizations to deliver their products much faster actually, right? So think about concepts like BDD if you're trying to adapt a DevOps, or rather I would say that a QA in DevOps as well. And try to adapt in sprint automation, which is something like you will be able to automate your test cases during the sprint itself. So I have seen many people or many projects where they will be automating the test cases only in the next sprint actually. So say for example, for sprint one's test cases will be automated in sprint two. No, don't do that actually. That's not the best culture that we have to adapt for DevOps at least, right? Try to do in sprint automation and try to be more try to take a shift left approach all the time actually, so that you will be able to think much faster. You will be able to think more from the faster delivery perspective, right? And one thing what you need to keep in mind as a QA is try to put continuous testing process in your pipeline, right? So there are many organizations where we have seen that the build process alone will be automated, whereas the testing will be kickstarted manually, right? Or they will be executing the test cases in an auto in a manual fashion, but in an automated test cases format, right? So try to reduce all those kind of things and adapt the continuous testing process, which we will be looking in the consequent slides actually, right? So let's talk a little bit about continuous testing, but before that, you need to understand what exactly this continuous integration means to us actually. So continuous integration is a process in which the entire build of that particular application is automated, and we run our tests also in an automated fashion, right? So integrating your build process along with your along with your test cases in an automated fashion is called as the continuous integration. But again, it can be of different ways. You can just define it in different ways as well. But for our context, continuous integration is something like you're embedding your test cases directly into your build pipeline, right? But let's talk a little bit about continuous testing. I told that we need to integrate our test cases within the build pipeline, right? So we need to understand there is a concept called continuous testing itself. Actually, it's a subset of continuous integration where we need to make sure that the artifacts or the test cases what we are going to execute are relevant to that particular application or that particular build, right? So say for example, there might be a situation where like after the build completes, you have to kickstart your smoke tests, right? So if you see in the traditional way what we are talking about, right, the developer will be developing the application and he will be deploying the code to the environment. Once it is done, as a manual tester, what we will do is we will kickstart our smoke test packs, or rather we will be doing it manually, checking whether all the application functionalities are working fine or not. Probably a monkey testing kind of a thing, right? Once it is done, the manual tester will kickstart the automated tests, right? So this particular activity is completely manual. Even though we are executing our tests in an automated fashion, this particular process is completely not automated. It's completely manual. So it means that we are trying to take so much time to do this particular process. It is very slow, right? It is absolutely slow, because once the automated tests are done, then we will give a green flag saying that, okay, let's deploy to the next environment. And again, the developer will commit to the next environment, deploy it to the next environment. And again, we need to do the smoke test. And again, we need to do the regression test manually, right? So this kind of an activity is what we are following very traditionally in many projects as well as of today. But DevOps doesn't talk about this actually. What DevOps talk completely is, we need everything to be automated. Whatever we are seeing over here as part of the manual test cases, sorry, manual process, everything has to be automated here actually. So what is the difference between the traditional way and the DevOps way? So basically, the developer will commit the code to the source control, right? Likewise, as a tester, I will be automating almost most of the cases. As much as, whatever possible cases I can automate, I need to automate it. So once I'm done, I will be pushing it to the source control actually. So what happens here is, the moment the developer pushes the code to the source control, the automatic build will trigger actually. So what that automatic build will do is, it will automatically pull the code from the source control and build the application and deploys it to an environment. So automatically, once that deployment is over, our test automation scripts will be executing automatically. So when I say in an automated fashion, it it just pulls the code directly from the source control and then executes it on our request actually, or on our configuration. However we want, we can configure it. So this can be of anything. This can be of any tests like smoke tests, sanity tests, or regression tests. You can configure it however you want to execute, and make sure that the build that we have put in this particular environment is risk free actually, or bug free, right? So if you see here, this is what we are doing here in the manual way. In the traditional way, we are just doing everything in manual way. But in the DevOps, we are doing everything in a continuously integrated way. So this is what continuous integration is all about, right? You integrate all your build process and your test process in an automated fashion without any manual intervention, and then make sure that the build is properly working and deploy it to the, or rather I would say promote it to the next environment. So to promote it to the next environment, we need to consider a couple of parameters. So one of the key parameter, what we have to look is the test results threshold. So what is this test results threshold is all about is, so say for example, I was talking about the continuous testing cycle, right? So this is the place where the continuous testing cycle kickstarts. So if you get into this particular area, you will be able to see this is what we are trying to achieve over here, right? So once we get the source control from here, the build happens. So during the continuous testing phase, we will be able to execute three types of test cases actually. One is smoke test, the other one is the sanity tests, and the third one is the regression tests. So we were talking about threshold limits, right? So what is the threshold limit is, I need to make sure that whenever I execute my smoke tests in the continuous testing phase, I need to make sure that it's 100% pass, 100% it is passing, right? So only if it is passing, I will be triggering my sanity test. So say for example, if the smoke test is not passing, right? So say for example, the basic functionalities of the application is not passing, then definitely there is no point in, triggering the sanity tests and the regression tests. Because end of the day, you will be able to see that lots of failures will be happening in these two areas, right? So that's why I'm making sure that my smoke tests are 100% passing. Only then my sanity tests will be triggered for that particular application or that particular build actually. So there might be a situation that not 100% sanity test that will be passing. Let's be very practical, guys. So at least like we need to be more practical when it comes to DevOps, because we have to make sure that like we are implementing the solution from the practical perspective as well. So when it comes to sanity, there might not be a situation where all 100% tests will be passing, right? But at the same time, you can keep a threshold saying that, okay, if I have 10 test cases and if I have 9 test cases that are passing, I'm okay to run my regression tests, right? So if that particular threshold is not met, then absolutely you're not going to promote that particular build to the next environment. You have to fail that particular build and intimate the testers and the developers saying that, boss, the build is failing because of so and so reason, please have a look at it. And this particular process is completely automated in DevOps, and you're not supposed to do any manual steps over here at all, right? Coming to the regression part, actually. So regression, in the sense, like, it differs from organization to organization on how you're going to define your regression packs. But again, what I have seen is like regression pack is something like you have to execute all your system tests and your end-to-end tests as well. Or some organizations might be having a only end-to-end tests as their regression packs. So you need to make sure that all your test cases are passing. Rather, I would say that at least 80% of your regression tests are passing. And if you think that is okay, and you can just make use of couple of tools like report portal or something like that to make sure that your build is okay and you're analyzing the test results, and then promote it to your next build, next environment. Actually, we will talk about those tools in next slide. Meanwhile, if you think like how you have to decide it, you can cut here saying that, okay, when before I promote it to the next build, I need to make sure that my approvers, probably like like your lead analysts or lead developer, have to promote saying that, okay, I'm fine with 80% passing or 90% passing. Let me just promote it to the next environment, right? It's QA or the QA lead or the developer lead to give a flag saying that whether they can just move it to the next environment. But there are organizations where this particular process will not be there. So because it's a manual process, right, where we just wanted to take a stop and then approve it and then goes to the next environment. There are many organizations where they will say that, no, I don't want this particular manual intervention to be there. Rather, they will just automate that particular process as well, saying that if there is a 80 percentage, greater than 80 percentage pass rate, I'm happy to put it to the next environment. So this particular continuous testing phase includes everything. It is not only related to your UI testing alone, it is your API tests as well should be executed as part of this continuous testing phase. But here is a challenge, right? So there might be some places where like you might be thinking that, Giri, do I need to execute the unit tests as well as part of continuous testing? So in my personal experience, I mean, rather, I would say that with my personal experience, I wouldn't run it as part of continuous testing. Rather, I would do it as part of the build process itself, because it's more relevant to the developers to make sure that their code is working fine according to their unit tests that they are drafting. It doesn't comes under testing scope at all. So I will not be I will not be executing as part of the continuous testing perspective, because this is one question that I frequently get it from many people. So that's why I just wanted to highlight it over here. Now, let's get into some best practices actually. So best practices is something like I have drafted all these things based out of my personal experience. It differs from organization to organization or person to person, but most of them will adhere to this particular best practices which I'm showing here, right? So first thing first, what you need to do is like try to do your test automation with the test automation pyramid principles actually. So try to have your test coverage like 50% unit test cases, 40% integration tests, which is nothing but your API tests, and try to have minimal UI test cases, guys, because that is how DevOps is going to be much faster. But again, it's up to you guys to decide on your organization and your project based on the percentage. But make sure that you have very less UI tests, or adapt, a test automation framework that can execute your tests much faster. so that it will be easy for you guys to make this particular build much faster. And you can just make sure that it is the time to market is much less when compared to other uh, 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 methodologies that we have adopted. So the next one is what we need to do is introduce parallel execution as much as possible, actually, because if you think, Giri, I have UI tests, I have thousands of UI tests that I need to execute before I push it to the next environment. Try to adhere parallel execution, because I have seen many organizations are not, leveraging the power of parallel execution. So try to introduce parallel execution in your DevOps pipeline, which will eventually try to reduce a couple of minutes, or rather I would say hours as well, depending on your number of test cases, right? And the next best practice, what I would personally do is periodically audit my regression test cases. Because if I have, what I personally think is like, if I am working for an enterprise application, and if I have more than say 100 tests, right, 100 regression tests or 100 end-to-end tests, I would really audit it actually. When I say audit, I will be checking whether that regression test case is really required or not. So I will be doing it every 2 sprints or 3 sprints once, to make sure my pack is up to date, and to make sure whether my pack is quite covering most of the areas what I wanted to test, and to make sure my pack is executing in less time actually, right? So have a periodic audit on your regression cases very frequently, probably like 2 sprints or 3 sprints. It's up to you guys to decide actually, but I do every 3 sprints once to make sure whether everything is okay, right? And then try to make use of concepts like service virtualization and visual testing. So that is something I have learned, because like there might be a situation where your services might not be available when you're doing the build, right? End of the day, it's a lower environment where we are going to virtualize. We are not going to do it in pre-prod or staging or something like that. We are going to do it in a lower environment. You can adapt the service virtualization, because most of the time that particular services or something will be under development, or it might have not got built at all, right? So during that time, try to use the concept of service virtualization, so that it will be easy for you to do it. And then comes the visual testing. So visual testing is a new concept. It's not a new concept, it is becoming very popular these days, because like it drastically reduces many functional tests what we are trying to do as part of our test automation. So say for example, I have personally seen people writing test cases to validate whether the particular label is present there or not, which is absolutely not required, right? So and a big text that is part of the footer, or there as part of a caveat or something like that, is present or not. So during that time, rather having a separate test cases, which eventually takes time to do that, use concepts of visual testing actually. So visual testing is much faster, and it will be able to reduce maximum number of functional tests what you're trying to write here as well. So I personally used Apply tools and WebDriver IO visual regression tool as well, which drastically reduced a lot of time from the functional testing perspective. And it's up to you guys to decide which tool you want to use, right? And then try to avoid writing tests or executing tests that has batch process. So say for example, like there might be a situation where you have to execute your test cases, and it has to undergo a batch process, probably overnight or something like that, and then the next day you have to go and check whether that has been updated or not. So try to avoid those kind of tests, because it consumes more time actually, right? Try not to use those kind of tests in the DevOps pipeline, rather focus on something that is much faster and reliable, right? Just because we need to execute our tests much faster, it is not like we have to skip couple of important tests. You need to make sure that your test cases are being given priority, and you have to add it in the regression cases to make sure that the build is going faster, right? And then leverage the usage of AI tools, guys. So when I say AI tools, Report Portal is one of the best tool that I have seen. So post execution, say for example, like if I have executed thousands of test cases, right? And if there are 200 test cases that are failing, so 800 test cases are passing, which is great, which is absolutely great, but 200 test cases are failing. Think and say, as a person, if you go and sit in the morning, right, and if you start looking out what is the problem behind all those 200 test failures, it takes hours and hours of your efforts to do that, right? So that's where you have to adhere to AI tools like report portal, which eventually helps you in doing the analysis and tells you whether it is a product bug, or is it a test automation script bug or something like that actually. So you don't have to worry about sitting and doing all those kind of analysis. Rather, tools like report portal will do it for you, right? So these are a couple of best practices which I have personally seen and implemented, which eventually gave a very good return of investment or results for adapting the DevOps culture as part of the QA, right? Now let's quickly see a live demo when it comes to Azure DevOps, right? You can just try to use many tools like Jenkins, like I said, like I've given over here. You can use Jenkins, or you can use Azure DevOps or AWS or whatever it is, right? So you can use whatever infrastructure or tools that you want. But again, just for this demo, I'm going to use Azure DevOps, where I have just created a simple test called Cypress DevOps demo, where I have a couple of tests that I've put it in my repo. So I just did it yesterday. So you will be able to see lots of things that I've pushed it yesterday. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something from my local machine. So say for example, I have Visual Studio Code in my machine. I'm going to change a small change over here, and I'm going to push it to my Azure DevOps. So what happens automatically is the build will automatically triggered, and my tests will automatically get executed. Of course, this is not as part of the application build and deploy and then testing. I'm just showing only for the testing perspective how it has been integrated directly, right? So this is how you need to make sure your tests are also passing as well. So for that, what I'm going to do is, let's say, for example, like I'm just going to my package.json. I'm going to reduce this, right, to 5.5, and I'm just saving it. So ultimately, there will be a change. I'm going to give this, and I'm going to give the commit message as demo for uh, DC cap session. What is the time now? 14:34. Yeah, 14:34. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this actually to the Azure DevOps. So if you see here, I just pushed it. It has been pushed successfully. Now let's go to the Azure DevOps directly, and we will go to the pipelines where we have just configured, right? So the moment I pushed the change, it automatically triggered my build actually. So if you see here, my build is currently running. It has automatically, triggered my pipeline. So pipeline is something that is there as part of, DevOps, which you need to understand. It's more DevOps, oriented. So pipeline is a place where you have to specify how you have to build that particular application, deploy, and when you have to execute your tests, and so on and so forth. Actually, you have to configure it completely with your YAML file. So YAML file is something that is available within Azure DevOps, and it is there in Jenkins and other tools as well, where you have to configure and say what task it has to perform. Like, like the moment I trigger the build, install Node.js in the Ubuntu machine where I have just configured in the Ubuntu VM machine, and then install all the dependencies like Cypress or whatever dependencies that I want, and then run my smoke tests and run my regression tests directly from the test automation framework that I have directly from the source repo here, and then finally publish my result actually. So if you see here, this is what is happening as part of this particular pipeline execution. So if you click here and go to the jobs, you will be able to see exactly what is happening over here. So the moment I pushed my code, it automatically checked out the code from the repo, and then it installed Node.js in the Ubuntu machine, and then it started installing all the dependencies that we need as part of that test framework. It can be from the application build as well, so it can be configured however you want. So once it is done, my smoke test is done. My smoke test has been executed. I have just made sure that there is one test case that is there as part of the smoke, which has 14 tests in it, 14 steps in it. And then my regression test has been triggered automatically. And this will take at least 2 or 3 minutes to make sure that all my regression tests, almost like 200 plus test cases are there, are executed successfully. and then my test results will be published, because this is the task that I have created in my pipeline to make sure that the test results are also getting published. Once it is done, it will just check out. As simple as that, but very powerful and in an automated way. If you see here, none of them is manual, right? I'm not executing my smoke test manually. I'm not executing my regression test manually or triggering it manually, right? So everything is completely automated. All I need to do is, as a developer, I just have to push my code, and everything will be taken care by the DevOps tools itself, right? So everything is in a build in an automated fashion, right? So that is what we wanted to do, and it's going to take another a minute or two. Let me just quickly see. I think it will take some time, but I'll just try to show the one which I executed this morning. Yeah, if you see here, it says that all the stages what we have seen is passed completely, and my test results is also published, right? So in Azure, when you click on this link, it will be taking to the that particular build's test results actually. So I had 131 tests, which eventually took 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Of course, this is the power of Cypress. I love Cypress, that's why I'm just using it over here. It doesn't mean that Selenium is bad, or it doesn't mean that Selenium can't do it. Any tool can do it, but like all pros and cons are there between tools. But I adapted Cypress for this particular demo. So you will be able to see all the test results over here just below this particular filter, where you will be able to see all the tests and how much time it took to execute the test cases as well. Code coverage is something that is related to like the developers. If they wanted to do a code coverage analysis as well, they can do it and publish a report over here. And one good thing with Azure DevOps is everything is configurable. You can configure to the max. You can do wonders with DevOps, Azure DevOps. And so it will not take much time for you to do everything. A pipeline itself, it's quite faster. So if you see here, our build is done. So we just executed it now. And this is our test result actually. So just got executed now. And yes, it took 2 minutes and 54 seconds to execute all 131 test cases, right? So this is how we do continuous testing as well as part of the pipeline, and make sure everything is automated and nothing is manual, right? Having said this, we will get into the challenges that we might face, or rather, yeah, sorry, just before that, I'll just tell you an advanced DevOps pipeline that I have worked with. It is completely Dockerized. So this is almost 2 years old now, but again, the concept remains the same. You can just try to use it as much as possible. This is something like we have created the environment itself as part of the Docker. So say for example, the Docker containers that creates the environment itself dynamically. So there is no dedicated server that is available for us. So that was a challenge for us. So we created a Docker container that has the environment itself. So it is on the fly. So we created a Docker container for that particular QA environment. We deployed our code. We executed all the test cases, all the regression tests. Once it is done, we created another container for our UAT environment, and then we have just pushed the code over there. We executed the tests, and then we promoted to the production deployment. So this entire process of pushing the code and doing the testing and putting it to the production directly is called as continuous deployment, right? So we have seen continuous testing, we have seen continuous integration, and this is a new word called continuous deployment, where we are just passing our or deploying our application code in an automated fashion within different environments and to the production as well. So this is also called as continuous delivery, right? So continuous delivery is something like everything is automated and then pushed to directly to the production, right? So this is one project which we have done it along with the Docker container, which became very success. And I thought I'll just give it to you guys as well as part of this demo. And we'll spend another 4 minutes to look after the benefits and the challenges that we have, that I have faced, and we will directly get into the question and answer session. So first benefit, like I said earlier, it accelerated the time to market actually. So drastically, it helped us to, it's a learning curve. Again, it might take few weeks or few sprints for you to, adhere to the DevOps policies or DevOps principles. But again, end of the day, probably after a few months, you will be able to harvest the fruit. right? And then it gives more confidence on our builds basically. So if we have confident tests in our pipeline, we will have more confidence on our builds as well, right? So that is what we have given importance, where we just focused more from the testing perspective, in giving more importance to test automation and the tests that we are configuring to run as part of the pipeline, which eventually gave us a very good way of very good confidence. And then we integrated complete continuous testing in an automated fashion. We didn't do it manually at all. Everything was automated. And then with that one, we were able to get 70 to 80% faster test process actually. So since everything is automated right from smoke testing, sanity testing, and regression testing, and with the parallel execution and all, we were able to save almost like 70 to 80% of the test process itself, right? And then it was helpful for us to detect the defects much earlier, because since we are going to do for every build, we will be able to identify the defects much faster. So it is not like, in our traditional waterfall model, what we do is we have the build. We will be having a build after a week or so, and then we will be executing the tests, and then we will be able to find the defects. Again, it goes to fix and everything. So it's not going to happen in that way. So everything is on a daily basis. We execute it on a daily basis, much faster, and we were able to identify much more defects much earlier actually, right? If your project is adapting the BDD way of work culture, the living documentations are going to be the Bible for you. So because it is going to execute it on the daily basis or regular basis, the living documentation gets added up on every build, or rather I would say that it gets updated on the every build, and we were able to get the most recent living documentation of what we have in that particular build. When I say build, the application build itself, right? Provided if you adhere to the BDD process and the principles very religiously, right? And then eventually, since it was much faster, and it reduced so much of time, we were able to save more money as well. So adhering to DevOps principles or adopting a DevOps culture will eventually helps you to save lots of cost and efforts as well, right? For testing, I'm talking about the testing. I'm not talking about the build or something. I'm just talking only from the testing perspective. What are the challenges actually? So this is something that is very interesting, because these are the ones that we need to first focus before we adapt the QA for DevOps actually. First thing first, what we need to think is we need to be technically skilled. Since I told you that earlier that we need to go automation, we need to make sure that our skills are completely technical. We are not supposed to be manual at all. And we need to make sure that our skills are not restricted to only UI automation or API automation or accessibility or something like that. We need to cross skill ourselves, because that's what the SDET is all about, right? The software developer engineer and test is all about knowing everything about testing from a technical perspective. So you need to be SDETs all the time actually, right? And continuous testing cannot be effective if the system is complex. Like I said earlier, if you are having batch process or if it is going to take more time, try not to do that, right? And sometimes it can slow down your tests if they are not much robust, in the sense like if you're not going to adapt, or if your tests are not up to the mark, right? It might reduce the test time execution as well. So make sure that your tests are much robust, and it is much faster when compared to unnecessary automated test cases that we have to put it in the pipeline, right? And then comes the test data generation. This is one of the major challenges that we faced, because there might be a situation, definitely in your project as well, where you will be creating your test data prior to your test execution, right? So there might be a situation where you will be creating thousands of test data and putting it in an Excel sheet and then making use it in the pipeline, or rather in an automated tests, right? So that is a slight challenge, but it can be fixed probably if you want to adhere to a couple of infrastructures, like putting it as SQL Server, or putting it in a MongoDB or something like that, where you can just take it in the automated scripts down the line from the pipeline. So you can think from that perspective as well. And sometimes the external dependencies can also slow our execution. So say for example, like if you are say for example internet speed, right? In one of the customer where we were using browser stack, the internet becomes very slow when we are trying to connect to the internet. So at that time it was a major disturbance for us not to achieve DevOps completely, right? So these are a couple of challenges that you will definitely face if you start adapting QA along with DevOps, right? Try to think in advance on how you can just mitigate these challenges before you start doing the DevOps, right? So just a quick recap on what is it we have discussed. So we just saw what is DevOps and what is the role of a QA in DevOps, and we learned about continuous integration and continuous testing, and how we need to achieve continuous testing and how it differs from the traditional way of doing testing. And we saw what are the different stages of continuous testing and what is the threshold limits that we need to follow. But keep in mind, this threshold limit can vary from organization to organization, but let's be very practical and then adapt the threshold limits. And then we saw a couple of best practices and the benefits and challenges as well. And we saw a small live demo on how Azure DevOps executes your test cases in a integrated pipeline, right? With that in place, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Giri, for the awesome session. And no, you made the session really lively with hands-on, session as well by including hands-on exercises to this session. And no, from your talk, like the testing role have been moved more into a creative sort of thing. So now I could see an the strategic phase of automation through DevOps by incorporating DevOps into guys, like if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your question in the Q&A tab, or else like you can use the chat tab as well. Giri will answer all your questions related to this session. Okay, I hope like we got one
Okay.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. How would you suggest a startup with no too little process and work framework setup should start moving towards a DevOps setup? Where to start? That's a very good question. So, what I would suggest is you just have to think from the think first from the application build process perspective. Let's not get into QA directly. Let's focus only from the build perspective on the particular application. And then once that particular process is done, like continuous integration, like the moment I push the code, my build should be automatically triggered, and the build should happen automatically, and the deployment should happen automatically, right? So let's, if I were you, I will just try to focus only from the build process perspective, and then slowly get into QA next, like integrating my QA tests in an automated pipeline. And then next is my continuous deployment, in the sense like deploying my after I tested that particular environment, I will be thinking about pushing that particular code to the next environment. So something like that. It's an incremental model. We need to start looking from the DevOps perspective. So to answer your question, first start from the build, then go to tests, and then go to deployment. Actually, I mean continuous deployment, right? Okay, what are the career options in DevOps if a person is switching over from a non-technical job? Actually, so when you say it is non-technical job, I'm not very sure. Is it something like manual testing, or okay, non-tech job itself, right? Okay, so uh, it will be challenging, to be very honest. It will be very much challenging, but what I would suggest you is to go through the different types of SDLCs that are available, because DevOps is also a concept that is adhering to the SDLCs. So I would suggest you to first go through the SDLC, software development life cycles, and then know exactly the different phases on when they have to adapt what type of the rather I would say the different stages of different SDLCs, and then you can just get into this DevOps perspective, because DevOps is huge and it is interdependent on the SDLCs, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Giri, for the wonderful session. And you made the session really lively. And thank you so much for incorporating like a lot of information into this session. I know. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful time. And see you all with an amazing speaker and very interesting topic in the next session. And thank you, Giri. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye. Bye.